this is going to be a very basic introduction to lighting. I'm not going to discuss everything in details, but it'll be good enough to get you started. Anyway, so let's start. So what we're going to do is we're going to discuss all the lights in details that are required, and I'm going to discuss all these lights. There are basically 1 2 3 4 5 6 kind of lights in Maya. So the first one that we're going to discuss is the point light. So before we discuss, let me just create a basic geometry so that we can apply the lights on and we can see them in action. So now what we have is we have a sphere sitting right in the center of the plane. So let me just increase the size of the sphere. Okay, alright, so now that we have this sphere sitting right at the center of this plane, what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and create a point light. So anything that you create in Maya will always come in the center of the scene, so you'll have to just move this light and place it wherever you want the light to be. So basically the point light is point light actually emit light uniformly in all directions. Take for example a bulb or a glowing star in the space. So that is what it does. So we generally use it for very small source of lights like a bulb, or like a candle or a star in distant space. So that is what we use it for. So if you hit 7 in your scene, you actually get into the light mode. So what you do now is if you move this source around, you can see how it is actually changing the direction of the light. So this is what is called point light. If you look on the right hand side, if you don't see this, hit Ctrl A. If you hit Ctrl A, you actually go into the attribute editor of whatever you selected. So right now I'll select this. If I hit A, I'll go into the attribute editor. Alright, so now if you look on the right hand side, we have something called color. So if you change the color to, let's say, red, so the light is going to become red or yellow or whatever you like based on what we're working on. So again, we'll have to select light. You can change or increase or decrease the intensity. So if you increase the intensity, if you decrease the intensity, you can do that from this one. There's something called light effects that we do not need to know right now. And then we have something called shadows. So if I click on this and if I hit render, you will see now this is actually casting shadows. So let me just go ahead and change some properties in the render setting. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pull this up to full HD so that we can see stuff properly. Alright, so now if I go ahead and hit render, it is going to render. You see the shadows are here. Although we can play around with different attributes and increase or decrease the intensity of the shadows. We can have multiple lights in one scene. If you just click on this, hit D, and have the second light placed in the scene, so then you will have 2 lights and both will be casting shadows. So that is point light for you. Alright, so let's just delete these 2 lights and okay, let's just delete these 2 lights and look at the second light, which is the second light that we're going to discuss is the spotlight. Spotlight, as the name suggests, is the light which is mostly used in VFX. So whenever we are working on a scene in production, most of the artists they like spotlight because of the control that we have on spotlight. So spotlight looks, what it does is it gives you the ability to spot, to throw the light on a spot. You can do this exactly same things. You can increase or decrease the intensity from this right side, and then there's something called drop off. So So that is going to help you increase or decrease the the drop off of the light. So if now, right now this is very soft, so let's just select this light again and make and decrease the drop off. So what it is going to do is it is going to give a very hard edge. So that's why we play around, so we can just play around with the drop off to soften the edges and and make it look better. All right, so that was spotlight. Again, we have these shadows and a lot of other attributes, but right now we'll just stick to these basics. So the next light that we are going to be discussing is the directional light. So what is directional light? Let me just hit 5 so we go back to the shaded mode. So let's just go ahead and create a directional light. So directional light has nothing to do with its location in the space. If I hit 7, I can move it anywhere in 3D space and it is not going to change the direction. So if you want to change directional light, you'll have to rotate it. So the moment you rotate, it starts. So that's how you control a directional light. It is controlled by rotating it. You can move it anywhere in 3D space and it is not going to change direction. Basically we use a directional light to replicate sun or light coming from a very big source. Usually I usually use it to when there is the set is there is an outside set where there needs to be a sun or a big source of light. I generally use directional light for that. Let me just delete this and hit 5 again to go back to the shaded mode again. So the next light that we're going to use is going to be the area light. So let me just create an area light, and again it is going to come to the origin. Let me just hit 7 again. So basically area light is basically a two-dimensional rectangular light source. We can use area lights to simulate the rectangular reflections of windows on surfaces. You can use it in many ways. It is a little similar to the ambient light, which we're going to be discussing next. So area light is again a good source. It's basically your choice. A lot of people like using area lights. Some people like point light, others like spotlight. So there's no hard and fast rule. You can use the light that you're most comfortable with. The idea is to light an object as per client's requirement or as per the shot. So let me just delete. So that was basically area light. So let me just delete this. I'll hit 5 again so we go back to object mode. So the next light that we are going to be talking is the volume light. Let me just go ahead and create a volume light. So volume light basically is generally we do not use volume lights, but if I would use volume light if I want to light something from inside. So what you can do is you can create this, and if you go ahead and on the right hand side, and if you click on this inward, and if you hit you should not see any. Alright, so you have this the light illuminating the object from inside. So that's what I would use volume lights for. Generally, I mean, there are not many occasions where you would be using this light, but there are very limited use of volume lights, but it can come in handy in different situations. So let me just delete this again and hit 5. Alright, we are already in the shaded mode. Alright, let's go to the next light, which is the ambient light. So if I click on this ambient light, and if I'll just go ahead and hit 7. So what ambient light does is the ambient light just adds the same color intensity to all sides of an object, and it does not care about its position, or it just not it just adds the same color and intensity to all side of an object. So basically ambient light actually means, we generally in real life, ambient light has color because it actually picks up color from wherever it is reflecting. Ambient light basically means that if I have a light source and if there is a green board sitting next to an object, so the ambient light would be reflected from that green board onto the object, so the object would look a little green. So that's what the ambient light is, and we can replicate that. We can use this, we can fake it, we can cheat those kind of stuff in Maya through ambient light. So these were the basic 6 kind of lights that I wanted to talk about. So let's just try and light this sphere and see how we can make it look good. So what I'm gonna do now is I am simply gonna help you understand the 3-point lighting system, and it does not matter what kind of light you use. You can use any kind of lights that you're comfortable with, as long as you're getting the desired results. Let me just start by using a spotlight. So usually what I do is, if I have to set up a 3-point lighting system, usually that is used to, if you have a character in your scene and you want to give a nice look to the character, what I do is I'll just go ahead and create a spotlight here. So a spotlight will come here. Usually this is going to be your primary light, which has the maximum intensity, which is your main light. So main light has the maximum intensity. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna go ahead and place this wherever convenient, and I'm just gonna go ahead and so that's how it is gonna look. Let me just rotate this in perspective view. What we need to do is in 3-point lighting system, we need a light that fills this area. So you can use any light. You can use directional light, you can use point light, or you can use another spotlight. So basically what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna go ahead and increase the intensity, because point light has the maximum intensity. Let me hit 7 here, and then I'll be able to see. Okay, so this is how it looks right now. Let's just go ahead and alright, so now you see this dark edge. So what we need is something that fills a little light and it gives a it doesn't look that dark. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and create a directional light. So, and I'm gonna place it right here. Directional in 3-point lighting system, your fill light is generally opposite the main light, and because this is a directional light, it doesn't matter even if you leave it on the ground, it is still going to illuminate in the same direction. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna go ahead and use this light to fill the shadows. I'm just gonna place it okay. So because this is the secondary light, the intensity cannot be that hard. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna decrease the intensity, and I'm gonna go ahead and just render this to see how it looks. Alright, so now we have this nice fill light which is filling in this object. It's not dark as it was earlier before we had this light. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna decrease the intensity of this from 1.5 to 1, and I am going to decrease the intensity from 0.4 to 0.3. Right, let's see how it looks. You can actually control the mood of a scene using your Right, so I'm pretty okay with this. I like the way this is, and you know, we're trying to focus on this side of the ball, and I like how the secondary light or the fill light is filling in. So there's and you know, there's something called a rim light. So basically what we need to do is we need to make sure that our 3D object or whatever we are trying to light, it actually does not merge with the background. So just to create that fine distance, we use something called a rim light. So basically I would use another light which is going to be again a directional light, and I'm gonna just go ahead and I'll just go ahead in the top view, and I'm gonna place this in this direction, and yeah, I'm gonna rotate this, because the idea of having this light is just to have this nice little rim here, like you can actually see. So that's the whole point of the rim light. So okay, we can't do too much, so the idea is to have this nice little rim light. Let me just render this and we'll see how it looks. So you see this nice edge that we are getting, that is the whole point of having the light. It just separates the object from the background. So that was the whole point. It just makes the scene look, if you actually look at any CG film or any you know good photographs, you would always see that the object or the people are actually, they have this nice rim light. What it does, it'll actually separate the background from the foreground. Cool. So now that we have a little idea about you know, about the lighting, let's just talk a little about shadows. So if you want your light, like I told you like I told you earlier, that if you want your object to emit shadows, you can use depth map shadows, and what it'll do is it'll start to emit shadows. Right, so now we have shadows here. We can increase or decrease the color. Let's say I don't want that harsh shadows, so I'll just change the color, and the shadows should be much lighter. Right, the shadow is much lighter now. So you can use all these different attributes within Maya to light your scene and to change the mood of your scene. You can use this filter size, this bias, and this resolution to you know, get a good quality of shadows. So all you need to do is to, you know, just start playing around with all these different attributes and see what it does for you. It'll be very difficult to kind of take, you know, to explain all these in details. The idea is just to get you started with lighting, and you just play around with all these different attributes. Right, so another important thing that I wanted to talk to you about in this chapter is, let us go back in the shaded mode. Alright, I'll have to delete this light anyways. Alright, yeah, let me delete this light. Here you go, so this is deleted. Okay, so let's just create another object. What I'll do is we have this sphere here. What we're gonna do is we're gonna create another cylinder. Now that we have a cylinder in the scene, and we'll create another cylinder, I'm gonna talk about something called light linking. In real world, that really doesn't happen. If you have a light in your scene, it is going to fall on all objects, whichever comes in its way. But in Maya, because this is a CG world, we have control over our lighting system. So what we're gonna do is, I'm gonna talk about light linking. So what I'm gonna do is, I'm just gonna go ahead and create a point light, and I'll hit 7. Alright, so we have a point light right here, and we can see it is actually lighting all 3 objects. Let's just go ahead and render this. Alright, so now we see that this light is actually affecting the ground plane, this cylinder, and the sphere. So let's just go ahead and something called relationship editor. We go into light linking, and then we go into light centric. Okay, so if you select this light, this point light, it on the right hand side it shows all the objects that are linked to this light, or all the object that this light is affecting. Let's say I do not want both the cylinders to get light from this light source, so I'm just going to uncheck them. I'm going to close this, and I'm going to re-render. Alright, so now we are not seeing these 2 lights. Why we are seeing black is because these objects still exist, and they're just, you know, kind of casting shadow on this plane. So now these 2 sources cannot be seen because there is no other light. So let's say if you want these to be seen, if you create another point light, then you will be able to see these objects. Let me just hit. So now you see, because the second light that we created is affecting all other objects, so these 2 are getting double the intensity, while these 2 are only getting affected by the second light. So this is the basics of light. You can just go ahead and, you know, try out different things. Let me just go ahead and hit 5. This is pretty much it, and what I'm gonna do is, let me just create another light, point light. And I'll hit 7. So let me just go here, point light. Okay, cool. So light effect. So there are, you know, these are different light effects that you can use. Let's say if I go ahead and click on this, and if you render that, it is actually going to show the light source. So again, the idea is to, you know, kind of go ahead and check all these lights and check all these attributes to see how it affects scenes in different ways. You know, the whole point of lighting in visual effects mainly is to make sure whatever CG object or whatever computer generated objects that we are putting into the scene matches up with the original live plate. Let's say in case of transformers, all the transformers are basically CG, and you know, all the shooting happens without those transformers on the set. And when we are placing those transformers, or when we are placing those CG objects into the live action plate, we have to make sure they match the natural light of the set. So that is the whole point. So that is why we go, usually the supervisor would go on the set, and he's gonna record data, and he's gonna click pictures, and you know, we usually have this chrome ball which records all the lights. So all we do is put the chrome ball in the center of the scene. This is the old style of doing it, but a lot of people still do it. They put this chrome ball, which is a shiny reflective surface, in the center of the scene, and they'll take pictures of the chrome ball. So what it does is it'll take into account all the lights that are coming in, because then we know from which direction the main source of the light is, where is the fill light, where is the rim light. So all these kind of things are recorded on the set, and then it is used in you know, when we come back into production, or when we come back to studios, we use that information to light the scene. There are a lot of other things, you know, image based lighting and indirect lighting, and you know, a lot of other things that needs to be discussed, but I think for this course we're just keeping it to the bare minimum just to get you started. And I really hope that you've understood a little about lighting from this chapter. I would really like to thank you for watching it, and I would love to see you in my next class. Have a good day. Goodbye.